Hi, we're the Eddy family. My name's Raelynn.
I'm Caleb.
This is our 3-year-old daughter Reese and our almost 1-year-old daughter Raelynn.
Tell us about your journey to getting a diagnosis. When did you first notice symptoms?
So Raelynn was born July 11th, 2020 on Caleb and I's 5th wedding anniversary. When I was pregnant with Raelynn, at my anatomy scan, they actually told me that I had a single vessel umbilical cord. So they did different genetic screenings, and the last few weeks of my pregnancy, I had to go in a couple times a week just to monitor her heart and make sure that she was developing normally. But throughout my pregnancy, they said everything was fine. And even the day she was born, the doctor that evaluated her told us that he never would have thought anything, like he thought I had a normal umbilical cord based on the way she looked and was acting, totally healthy, happy baby girl. And we were discharged from the hospital 24 hours after, where we brought her home to meet her 3-year-old sister Reese.
When did you first notice symptoms?
So shortly after we brought Raelynn home, maybe a few days or so, I started to notice these very odd short episodes where she would get stiff, her eyes would deviate to the left, and she would usually cough or cry. Sometimes she would turn slightly purple, like almost like she was holding her breath. So definitely was very concerning. So we took her to the doctor for her first well visit, and I briefly explained it to them. But actually at the first well visit, that's when the doctor noticed that she had a little heart murmur. So we took her to the cardiologist, where they diagnosed her with a VSD, which is a small hole in her heart. The doctor didn't think it was related to the single vessel umbilical cord. He just pretty much said that this is very common and it'll most likely close on its own because it was very, very small. However, the episodes that I was talking about, they continued. So, and they were very concerning. So I called her pediatrician, and she actually told my husband and I to take her to the emergency room. So we took her down to Rancho Springs, and because of the way I explained her symptoms, the eyes deviating to the left specifically, she was transported down to Rady Children's Hospital. So on July 23rd, 2020, when Raelynn was transported down to Rady's, she was evaluated for 24 hours there, and she was seen by multiple doctors, nurses, and they all told me that her episodes was a bad case of acid reflux. So they told me, to adjust the way I was breastfeeding her and to hold her up for like 10 to 15 minutes after feeding her, to help her milk digest before laying her down. It was definitely very scary. Okay, so when we were at Rady's for the 24-hour monitoring, there was doctors that saw her episodes and assured me that it was just acid reflux, and I was obviously very happy to hear this because I thought it was something much worse. But I remember sitting there in the chair holding Raelynn, and she was having her episodes. And I just remember telling myself, like, it's okay, Brie, it's just acid reflux, she's gonna be okay. And we were sent home 24 hours later. So after we were discharged from Rady's, we went home, and despite my efforts of trying to help her acid reflux, or what was diagnosed as acid reflux, the episodes continued, and I, wasn't sleeping. I was really nervous, constantly monitoring her, worried that she was gonna choke, worried that she was holding her breath. So I called her doctor. I actually ended up videoing it and showed her pediatrician, and her pediatrician was like, let's just do an EEG just to make sure that she's not having seizures. And I was like, okay. yeah, that sounds good. So it was during the COVID-19 pandemic when all of this was happening, and in order for Raelynn to get an EEG, she had to get COVID tested. So I drove her down to Rady's in San Diego. The COVID test was just a pop-up tent, so I had to go through a drive-through. The nurse doing the COVID test came up. Raelynn was sleeping in her car seat. COVID tested her nose on each side, and it made Raelynn extremely upset. She was only, a couple weeks old. And so I quickly pulled into a parking spot, got her out to try and calm her, and she immediately started having another episode in my hands. And I was just, at this point I'm starting to feel crazy because I was just at Rady's the week prior and they assured me that it was acid reflux, and I knew it was more. And so despite the fact that she was still having these episodes, I drove home. My mom was watching my 2-year-old daughter Reese, and when I got home I just broke down crying, and I said, there's something's not right. Something's going on with my baby. And I ended up calling 911 that day, and thank God I did, because her episodes, which were seizures, they started happening more frequently and back to back, and she started holding her breath for a lot longer. And I'll never forget being on the phone with that 911 operator, and she was having me count Raelynn's breaths, preparing me to do CPR on her. It was horrible. By the time the paramedics got here and were trying to get them to stop, they transported us to Rancho Springs, and finally, by the time they got them to stop, she had had 20 seizures that day. So once we got to Rancho Springs, that's where the series of tests began. And I had called my husband on the way. He had just started a new job. It was actually his first day at work. And I called him and said, babe, Raylynn's having seizures and I'm on my way to the hospital. So of course he immediately drove home as fast as he could to meet me there. And when we were at Rancho, they started running tests. They did CT scans and spinal tap and all these things to try and figure out what was going on with our baby. She ended up getting transported back down to Rady's NICU, was hooked up to an EEG, had MRIs. They offered us genetic testing, you name it, she had it done. They were doing everything that they could to figure out what was going on with Raelynn. On August 3rd, 2020, the genetic doctors came in and told us that our daughter has a rare genetic disorder called PACS1. And at first I was like, PACS1, what's that? I've never heard of that before. And he said, yeah, well, it's very rare. Most people haven't heard of it. What he could tell us about it was that there was only about 30 individuals studied and researched. And based on the research done, he said, she will have global delays. The seizures are a part of the PACS1 diagnosis. Most children with PACS1 don't walk until they're 2 to 5 years of age. They all have some sort of speech delay, some are completely nonverbal, and she will most likely have some sort of learning disability. I can't really explain what it's like getting that news. But at the time, I was just so happy that my baby was just, gonna live. And we looked at her and saw her as this beautiful baby girl. And I remember the doctor telling me that we were so lucky because she was so young. You know, she was only 3 weeks old when we got the diagnosis, and we could start earlier intervention to help her. And that's the piece that I clung to, you know. So that was what got me through getting the diagnosis, is I was gonna do everything in my power to help this little baby.
When did you join the parent group?
So that was one of the things that the genetic doctor had told us at Rady's, that there was a parent support group, and he gave me the Facebook page to join. I didn't join right away. I waited a little bit. When we got home, I had like 10 doctors, specialists to call that they sent me home with. And I called Inland Regional Center and got set up with them so that we could get therapy started as soon as possible. Once I finally joined the parent group, it was a blessing because the parents on there are just so helpful. Numerous moms reached out to me just, you know, telling me that they were there to listen and they understood what I was going through. But to be completely honest, it was also very scary, you know, seeing the other kids, because Raelynn was so little, you know, she was just a tiny, tiny baby. So seeing the older kids was definitely challenging, but at the same time, I saw the parents celebrating the milestones that these kids were meeting, and just seeing their happy smiles, and it just warms your heart. These kids, they're amazing.
What would a cure mean to you and your family?
So we would never want to change who Raelynn is. She's the happiest little baby girl. She's such a joy to be around. But like I said, she's been in therapy since she was 2 months old and has seen probably at least 20 different specialists. She averages on 15 to 20 medical and therapy appointments every month. So to me and to our family, a cure would give us hope that, you know, maybe she could live a little bit more normal life one day. Not a life just surrounded with therapy and doctor's appointments. And as a parent, it's never easy to see your child struggle to meet milestones that come so easily to typically developing babies. And Raelynn is doing really great with all of her goals. Yes, she's doing very, very well. But it's a lot of hard work for her. Every move that she makes is lots of therapy, lots of repeated help, and a lot of patience, mostly on my part, because Raelynn is a very determined little girl. So a cure would just be wonderful because it would help her progress in her milestones and just make her life a little bit easier. So